Hello everyone. Today we are going to be drawing a donut in Procreate. So what I'll have you do is grab your canvas size and you can just turn your iPad to the side and it's just going to be the A4 canvas. We're going to be starting off with our fine-tipped pen just to draw out the outline of our donut as well. And so you can find this brush pack and palette pack in the description below as well. So next we're going to take the liquefy tool. So on the same layer that we have this, just to push in the sides so we don't have like a perfect oval. We want to make sure that it looks realistic. So we're going to push in the sides just like so. So you can follow along. As you'll notice on the bottom left, the size of my brush for the liquefy effect is well over halfway there. So you can play around with it, but just pick a size that makes sense so that the donut isn't looking too wonky looking. You just want to be able to push it in into having the sides of the oval squished in a bit, just like that, and the bottom squished. But we want to leave the top part of the donut to be still decently rounded. Okay, next we're going to be adding another layer, and this is going to be our icing layer. So you want to draw this right on top of your oval that you just created, and the idea here is that we draw some drips hanging off of the donut, and what I want you to do is close this shape by connecting the lines together so it is a full shape and there's no open loops essentially associated with it, because we are going to fill it in later. So I want you to go back to the liquefy tool and we're going to reduce the size just a little bit so we can essentially make sure that the icing all looks neat and tidy and there's no wobbly lines or anything like that, because we want it to look quite smooth and I wanted to have it give a nice dripping effect. So feel free to play with the size and the momentum here just to have it look the way that you want, and push those lines around so that there aren't any hard angles or anything like that. We want it to make it look like it's really just dripping. So next what we want to do is go to your circle layer where it's a donut, and we're going to turn that into a reference layer by tapping in press reference. We're going to create another layer and then pull it below the reference layer. What this is going to allow us to do is choose the color we want for our donut base and actually just pull it into that new layer we just put at the very bottom, like so. So by creating a reference first, it will allow us to drop color around the lines. And so we're going to do the exact same thing with the icing as well. So we just made our icing layer a reference. We made another layer. We're pulling it below that one. And now we're choosing a color to color drop into the icing. Now what I want you to do is go to your selection tool and create a hole in your donut. Press copy and paste at the bottom there, and it's going to create another layer, subtracting the selected area that you had. So it's actually just going to show that base layer on the bottom just like that. So I deselected those lines or the outline layers because we won't really be needing them going forward. But what I do now is I go to the icing layer, and you actually want to leave it, make sure you're not alpha locking it or anything like that, just leave it as is. And we're going to go to the liquify tool, and what I needed to do was again pull and play with the lines on this donut icing just so that it looked a little bit more full and not having wobbly lines and just kind of weird lines and unrealistic lines to what would actually look like if there's icing on a donut. Next, we want to go to our icing layer and we want to alpha lock it. So you just tap it, press alpha lock. So this allows us to not color outside of what we already have shaded as pink. So in your donut brush pack, what you're going to do is pick a soft brush. And after you're done alpha locking your icing layer, you're going to go in and you're going to start creating shadows or low lights in your icing. And then of course, anything that we draw on, we always want to make sure we're blending. So you can go to your blending pack. I also attach that brush pack in the description below as well. I use this brush or this blending brush pack for pretty much everything I use in Procreate, so I highly recommend you download that. But what you want to do is just take the blending brush and then you're going to go in and you're going to blend out your low lights. So we are going to be doing this a few different times with darker colors as well, but as you can see, this already creates so much depth in the icing. So we're going to take a darker color now and we're going to go over some of those areas, not in full because we don't want to completely cover some of those shadows, but just in some areas we want to add a little bit of a darker effect. Okay, and next we're going to pick our highlight color. So this is going to be like our light pink, so you can find that in the palette as well. But you just want to start creating some areas where the donut is going to have some highlights or light reflection as well. So this will be the base of our highlights, and I'm just going into certain parts of the donut to create a bit more of a highlighting effect in specific areas on the top. So you'll notice throughout this tutorial, I like to zoom into the top right-hand corner when I am choosing a new color for you guys, just to emphasize when new colors are being chosen and whatnot there as well. So just feel free to pay attention to that too. So I'm just picking a more, I guess you could say, intense pink color just to bring out some of the pink in the icing, and I'm not going to be covering that. I just wanted to give it a little bit more life with adding a little bit more pink to it. And of course, after adding all of this, again, make sure you are blending this out. We don't want any hard lines. You want it to all be soft and somewhat quite cohesive and all blending together, but make sure you're not over blending, because if you over blending, you're going to lose all of your highlights and your shadows. You definitely want to make sure that it's not overdone. So there's like a nice little happy medium in between that you want to try to achieve. So now we're going in with our lightest colors that we've had so far. So this is just going to, we're starting to build out more of the actual light reflection on our donut. And we're going to add this light reflection in only specific areas. And we kind of want them to be a bit harder of lines. We don't want it to be overly soft, but just try to follow along in terms of where I'm starting to add some of these, just so that you can get an idea as to how to build this out. So essentially, we're going to be adding it just to a few places on the donut itself. So next we're going to be going to the actual donut base, and we're going to start coloring in certain areas here as well. So if you go to your donut brush pack again, you want to pick the grainy brush. There's only one grainy brush in there, and looks just like this. I believe it's called Heavy Pastel. And so what you want to do is just use that, because that's going to be essentially the texture of the actual donut base for this. But you want to take a dark color and start filling in just the hole. And then we're going to pick a more like reddish tone, and we're going to add it to the corner. Don't fill it in, just add it into the corner there. And then what we'll do afterwards is we're going to hold down our smudge brush so that it picks up on the same brush that we've been using to paint in this donut hole, the blend, which will make it so much easier rather than going to go find it again in the smudge brush. So we can just use it. It should look something like this. We're going to be using this heavy pastel color for mainly the entirety of the base of this donut. So we're going to start adding some depth to it by taking a more orangey, burnt orangey color and going into just the top half of the donut. So feel free to alpha lock this donut layer at this point as well. I believe I do that in just a moment here, but that will also, again, just allow you to not go outside the lines like I just did there. So definitely make sure you're alpha locking your layers if you don't want to go outside the lines. But just want to mention here, don't go too low with this orange layer, I should say, because we want to keep that like light color, that foundation color, as a line that's going to sit in the middle of the donut, because typically donuts do have that lighter color like rim around the middle. So we want to keep that. So now I take a color that's slightly lighter than what we made the base originally, just so you can see that middle line a little bit better, give it a little bit more definition. But we're going to take that lighter kind of cream color, and we're going to take that same brush we've been using, but we're just going to make it a bit smaller. So we want to have it sitting like maybe 25% or around 20% in terms of size. And then you're just going to kind of create a line over top of that line that we had just there. And feel free to make this look a little bit messy, because it's definitely not supposed to look perfect by any means. It can look a little bit wonky and whatnot. So feel free to do whatever feels best for you, or whatever you think looks best. Well, all I'm doing here is just going in with some lighter color just to have a little bit more of like a reflection off the side of the donut as well. This is really just to give a little bit more detail to it. I go in, I blend it. It's really just a series. I find drawing in general is really just a series of layering colors and then blending, layering more colors and then blending. So essentially I go in with lights, I go in with darks, and then I blend, and then I do the whole thing all over again. So next, what I wanted to do was take actually the blending brush just to get a little bit more of a solid color, because that heavy pastel is a bit too textured for how much depth I'm trying to add into the corner of the donut right here, like underneath the icing, just to create a little bit more of like a shadow. So you can take a darker brown and go in underneath certain areas of the icing to create that shadow effect. You don't necessarily want to go on the bottom. It only makes sense to put it in certain places, like on the left side there. Perfect. And yeah, I decided to even go a bit darker. I feel like it just looks a little bit better. It gives it a little bit more depth. Okay, now we're going to go back to our fine tipped pen, and we're going to create a new layer that's going to sit on top of all the other layers that we have created. And we wanted to make it black so that we can see the sprinkles we're about to make. So we want all the sprinkles to be on the same layer. And what we're going to do is draw little elongated ovals, and some can be circles, but the main goal to this part, I did speed it up just because it took me a little bit of time, and it's going to take you a little bit of time too, because we want to make a lot, but this is probably the most lengthy part of the video, but I just want to explain essentially what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, and why I feel like this was probably the most effective way or quickest way to draw sprinkles or anything like this on on a donut like this, or on a drawing like this in general. So what I want you to do is draw these sprinkles out in terms of outlines of them on this layer. Now, most important part about this is making sure that all of your sprinkles, and in terms of the actual like shapes that you're creating, are closed. They're closed shapes. They don't need to be perfect looking, but they need to close, because we're going to be color dropping these sprinkles. So we're going to make this a reference layer and put another layer beneath like we did with the first two, but it's not going to work to color drop them if you don't close your shapes, and it's just going to color drop the entire page, which we don't want. It's extremely annoying. I did do it a couple of times in here because I realized I didn't check all my shapes properly. So you'll see at least one time me color dropping the entire page by accident. So just make sure everything is closed. I know it takes a hot minute, but it's definitely worth it, because going back and forth is quite annoying. So just make sure that you're paying attention to them all being closed properly. Okay, now we're going to create another layer. If you have any other reference images on, make sure you turn those off. So we're going to create another layer and put it underneath the new layer of sprinkles, but make sure the sprinkle layer is set to reference. And now is kind of the fun part. We're going to start dropping in the colors. And so I picked a series of blue, red, orange, pink, white, and you can pick whatever colors you want, of course, but those are the ones that I chose, and those are the ones in your palette as well. But essentially all you need to do is drag and drop, and if you actually wanted it to even go faster, that little blue bar at the top, which I do press at some point here, if you press that at the top, you can just start tapping the sprinkles and you don't actually have to drag and drop them all. So you'll see what I'm talking about in just a minute here, but I chose orange now. We're just dragging them around, and honestly, this is totally randomized. I just try not to have too many of the same color beside each other so that it does look more oh, perfect. There we go. See, color dropped the entire page. So I'm going to try to avoid that sprinkle for the rest until the very end when I need to fill that sprinkle again. So perfect. There we go. So just want to go ahead and actually just tap the sprinkles now. And that will work just as well as dragging and dropping the color into the sprinkle too. So once our sprinkles are all filled in, now we just want to take away the outline reference layer that we use for the sprinkles. And we want to alpha lock the sprinkle layer because we're going to add a little bit of shadow to some of the bottom of the sprinkles. What I like to do is actually just hold my finger on the colors that I'm using because I find it to be so much easier when I'm just grabbing the color rather than going searching for it. And so essentially I'm taking my blending brush from the blending brush pack and I'm going in with a darker, more like a gray, I guess you could say. So I went to the white and then I just pulled it down so that it's darker and that I could create a little bit more depth on the sprinkles so they don't look so flat. And I did that with each different color and just went in and started kind of adding just like a little kind of line at the bottom of each of the sprinkles. And I did that for each of the colors. So what I decided to do here was really just take my smudger brush and make sure they didn't have too many hard lines on the sprinkles as well. But now I'm going to go back to the icing layer. We can keep it alpha locked And I just wanted to go back in with a soft brush and essentially start adding a bit of shadow behind the sprinkles, but on the icing layer, so that it gives it even more of a bit of a realistic look. It almost looks like the light is kind of coming from the side there, or creating a shadow effect from like the bottom of the sprinkles there. So you'll just pay attention to, I guess, my placement of where I'm putting some of these shadows. Definitely gives a much more realistic almost effect to the donut as well by creating these little shadows. Okay, so still on this icing alpha locked layer, we're going to go with our fine tipped pen in our donut brush pack, and we're going to actually just draw some areas out with like the full white over top of some of the highlight, just to create it to be a bit more piercing in terms of the actual light reflection. So I wanted just to make some of it look a little bit more white rather than have it look a little bit more flat. So I just wanted to add this little bit of detail at the end, just to give it a little bit more of a realistic look. So I went into only on top of the areas we've already done again, and we just want to blend a little bit, not too much. We want to kind of create a little bit of a line, but it's still a bit more on the softer side. And now I'm just pulling some of the colors around, and really this is just the detailing part and just making it look all kind of cohesive. So, and I go in here with and just create a little bit more depth in that little pocket, because it looks a little bit out of place to me. I wanted to add a little bit more color to it, or a bit more depth to it there. Now I'm just taking a brighter pink and I'm just going in to do a little bit more detailing. So I wanted to add some more pink to the edge of my icing, just to give it a little bit more color down on the dripping area there, just to, make it look a little bit more like, give it a little bit more of a pop. But essentially, we are coming to the very end of this video, so I do really appreciate you guys watching my content and following along in this tutorial. If you guys found it helpful, or if you learned something new from this tutorial, feel free to comment in the comment section below, or if you have any questions, please let me know. But if you did like this video, please hit the like and subscribe button if you want to see more tutorials like this in the future as well. Thank you so much, and I'd love to see your art as well online, so feel free to tag me. Thanks so much.